Hello and welcome back again to Backtrack's F1 podcast with me, your host, Jodie. It's so great to have you here again for this, our preview of the Monaco Grand Prix. Before we get into all the interesting stuff, could I please ask that you give us a like, a subscribe, a follow on social media? The links to our socials are all in our show notes, and if you could give us a review on your podcast provider, that would be absolutely amazing, and I would be really, really grateful. Thank you. So it's Monaco this weekend, and in a way, Monaco needs no introduction, does it? It is widely regarded as the jewel in the crown on the F1 circuit. It is divisive. I know not everybody likes it. For me, this year, I've quite looked forward to it because it's the start of the European leg of the F1 season, which, being a bit of an old school girly like I am, I still love our European leg. And very selfishly, being in the UK, I quite like the fact that the races are at a far more reasonable time, which I appreciate means that for some of you around the world, they're not at a very reasonable time, and I am sorry. So yes, Monaco. F1 has raced here since 1950. It's a 78-lap race, and the lap record belongs to none other than Lewis Hamilton, who set the lap record back in 2021 with a time of 1 minute 12.909 seconds. Now that, of course, is the official race lap record that Lewis set. The actual fastest lap ever recorded around Monaco was, of course, Lando Norris last year, who did it in 1 minute 9.954 seconds. But the official race lap record does belong to Lewis. As you all know, it's narrow, it's winding, there's no straights, there's lots and lots of corners. And I think it was Nelson Piquet that described it as like riding a bike round your living room, which paints quite a picture, doesn't it? And I think he's absolutely right there. Last year, the weekend, well, I would like to say it was, I remembered it as being quite dominated by Lando Norris, but when I actually went and looked back a bit more carefully, it was, certainly through free practice, it was Charles Leclerc that was dominating everything. He was first in free practice 1, first in free practice 2, and free practice 3. And really, it was a kind of a Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri show in all of the free practice sessions. Hamilton got a bit of a look in on free practice 2, but it really was sort of between those guys, and it was looking absolutely great for Charles, for him to come out and win what is his home Grand Prix, which was something he was looking to do again. However, when we got to qualifying, it was actually Lando Norris that took pole. He just picked Leclerc to that pole position. So the first 4 in qualifying were Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, and a very good effort by Lewis Hamilton to take 4th on the grid. But certainly from qualifying onward, it was very much a weekend dominated by Lando. Yes, it can be a bit of a dull race at Monaco. There isn't room to overtake, especially with the Ground Force era cars that we had last year. Big, heavy, long, wide cars. There was really no hope of seeing much action there. But right from lap 1, we did actually see some action when Gabriel Bortoleto unfortunately went into the barrier at Portier, and that brought out a yellow. We had another yellow on lap 9 when Gasly ran into Tsunoda from behind. There was some really interesting and very, very clever pit stops done by the Racing Bulls team, which really, really benefited Hadjar. Don't know if you remember, but last year it was a mandatory 2-stop to try and break things up and add a little bit of a different element to make the race more interesting, and it absolutely spectacularly backfired because all we actually got was a huge DRS train. I do remember Fernando Alonso having a slightly better race because he'd had a really unlucky start to last year. He had, but I would argue that this year is definitely worse. So yes, Alonso went out on lap 38, smoke coming from the back of the car. But then by lap 49, as I say, we had this whole DRS train, and George Russell at the Nouvelle Chicane cuts the corner to get past Alex Albon. And when told by his team to give the place back, he claims that Albon is driving erratically and that he'll risk it and he'll take the penalty. I think George was expecting a 10-second penalty for that move. He'd followed Alex lap after lap after lap at this point, but the stewards took quite a dim view, and he actually ended up with a drive-through, which is a lot more than 10 seconds. It was more like 20. And then just a few laps later, Antonelli does exactly the same move on Albon, but actually does give the place back. I think he decides that, having seen what happened to George, that I think 2 drive-through penalties for both Mercedes would not have gone down too well. And then from lap 70, really, all eyes were on the front because Lando was holding on. He'd held the lead all the way through the race, more or less, but Charles Leclerc was absolutely hunting him down. Charles drove an impeccable race last year. I was quite impressed with him, and he really did look like he was going to catch Lando. As we know at Monaco, passing's very difficult, but he certainly was not letting that put him off, and he really did keep Lando honest all the way to the line. But yeah, Lando took the victory by 3.1 seconds, Charles Leclerc in second, Oscar in third, and then followed by Verstappen, Hamilton and Hadjar. Now, moving on to this year, obviously we have different cars, different regs. There is no mandatory 2-stop pit stop, so I'm very much assuming that everybody will be going and reverting back to the standard 1-stop. Monaco is a low-power track. Obviously, lots and lots of corners, no straights to speak of, so straight mode is disabled for this race. We're not using straight mode. And the tyres for this weekend are the hard is the C3, the medium is the C4, and the soft is the softest of all with the C5. Updates and upgrades wise, not a lot going on here. Nothing to speak of particularly for Racing Bulls, Ferrari or Williams. Most teams will be looking to tweak the suspension. Monaco's quite a bumpy track, so there'll be some tweaks with the suspension and the steering. Cadillac apparently are not bringing, they've said, another big update until Austria. Allegedly, Alpine are bringing this rear wing upgrade. And as we know, Alpine are good in low and medium speed corners. Gasly, although he had a bit of a disaster last year, generally loves Monaco. Colapinto is definitely found his groove at the moment, it seems. So I would be looking to see Alpine doing fairly well at Monaco. I think they will go quite well. Red Bull will be looking to improve the downforce at the rear of the car, so maybe doing something with the rear wing. McLaren ran a different front wing in Canada and decided that it was not really up to scratch and not what they wanted. So whether they'll bring that to Monaco, run it again and try and get some more data on it or revert back, I really don't know. They are a bit slower than Mercedes in the straight lines, but around Monaco, I expect to see them do better than the Mercedes. The McLaren's got a shorter wheelbase, so it's more agile around Monaco's corners. So I'm expecting to see them potentially better than Mercedes this weekend. Mercedes obviously had that floor upgrade in Canada. As dominant as they were in Canada, I really don't see them being dominant here in Monaco. It's not a track that's going to suit their car at all. It doesn't play to the car's strengths and it will emphasise all of the weaknesses such as they are. And we've also got to factor in, I don't know how much effect this will have, nobody really does yet, but we're now getting the extra engine checks regarding the compression ratio, which, as you remember, was a hot topic at the beginning of the year, that Mercedes were bending the rules regarding the compression ratio rate. Well, that will all be now being checked. How much of a dent in Mercedes' performance that'll make, I wouldn't like to say. I don't think they look too worried, but I guess we'll see. There is, of course, a lot of talk around Ferrari this weekend. Charles Leclerc loves Monaco, goes quite well here. Hamilton goes well here. It's a track that will definitely suit the Ferrari because the issue that Ferrari have is that they are a bit underpowered compared to the Mercedes and the McLaren, which, as we know, has the Mercedes power unit. As much as this track will emphasise all of Mercedes' weaknesses, in inverted commas, I think it will definitely play to Ferrari's strength. So I'm expecting to see a good performance by both Ferrari drivers this weekend. And the fact that Monaco will suit a more underpowered car may mean that we'll see a good result for Aston Martin this weekend, which would be absolutely wonderful. I'd be really happy to see them both finish. And I would definitely be happy to see them getting beyond Q1 in qualifying, and perhaps even one, or dare we say both, finishing in the points. Although I would really, really dearly love, no offence to Stroll, but I would love to see Fernando have a really, really good weekend and bank a couple of points, because the team need it, don't they? And I don't just mean that Fernando needs it and Lance needs it, but everybody in that team needs it. From the drivers and Adrian Newey and Lawrence Stroll, right the way down to the people working in the factories, because a team isn't just the drivers, it isn't just the people you see on TV, it's a whole band of people, and everybody at that team is really, really going to need that morale boost. So I'm really hoping that happens for them this weekend. I certainly think that we're going to see all of the good stuff that Adrian Newey has designed, because they'll be relying very much on the chassis this weekend. Like I say, the power unit won't matter so much, but I think we might get to see something a little bit special and see just what this Adrian Newey car can actually do. So I'm fingers crossed for the guys at Aston Martin, because I really do think they need that lift. Definitely good signs last time out, but yeah, I would love to see that this weekend. I would love for them to go well. I'm also hoping for better things for McLaren. I'm not going to labour the point again about the bizarre choice of tyres in Canada. Oh, look, I just laboured the point again. But I'm sorry, I'm still not over it. I really did not understand that one at all. It really, really was an utter disaster. They don't ever really seem to have a very salubrious weekend when they're in Canada anyway. It seems to be a little bit of a cursed track for them, certainly in recent times anyway. Obviously, I've touched on how well Lando did here last year. Piastri was no slouch last year either. So it would be really, really good to see both McLaren boys have a really good run at this. And I'm hopeful for them. I'm definitely hopeful for them. So thanks in no small part as well to what happened with McLaren in Canada. Ferrari are now sitting second in the championship. And again, we can't discount Red Bull. I don't see Monaco being a particularly great track for the Red Bulls. I mean, there's definite progress, isn't there? Max's first podium in Canada, a decent race in Canada for Hadjar. Shame he racked up so many penalties, but wasn't too far off Max's pace. Max traditionally goes quite well here. It will be interesting to see. I just don't think that the track will lend itself to the strengths that Red Bull have. I think, again, it's going to be another team that's going to have a magnifying glass held over some of the weaknesses a little bit. But somebody that will definitely be looking to have a much, much better weekend will be George Russell, because that is a huge deficit in points now to Kimi, 43 points. I mean, he did say last weekend pre-race that the only weekends he was concerned about were the 0-point weekends, and that's exactly what happened to him. So that is a very large gap. I believe it's the biggest gap ever between first and second at this stage of a season. But it doesn't mean anything. Look how many times last year we said that Oscar looked like he'd got one hand on the trophy. Oscar was a dead cert. Lando had to stop the rot. You just don't know which way it's going to go. And I keep saying this, Antonelli did have a drop-off in the European races last year. He did have a point where he struggled. I don't see him struggling as much this year completely. I think we've got a very different Kimi to what we had last year, but I wouldn't count on it. I think there's going to be opportunities for George to maximise results, and especially if Kimi's also unlucky and gets some kind of mechanical failure, George needs to make sure that he's maximising the results on that weekend. So yeah, he'll definitely be looking for something this weekend. As I say, I don't think this is a track that's going to suit the Mercedes one bit, but overall what George needs to do is make sure that he's beating Kimi. He's got to claw some of those points back. So when it comes to predictions for this weekend, it's a little bit more simple than it was in Canada, as there's no sprint. Now, as I've touched on, my general overview is that I think Ferrari will have a good weekend. McLaren will have a good weekend, because it can't be any worse than the last one. I think Aston Martin will have a good weekend. I've got a couple of, I wouldn't say they're wildcards exactly, but just a couple of vibes. The first of those being, when it comes to qualifying, I've done a top 5, and in 5th, I have put qualifying 5th, Pierre Gasly. And it's a little bit to do with all the things I've mentioned so far. That yes, last year was not great for him here, but generally he likes Monaco. And apart from the hiccups of the last couple of weekends, some of which haven't been his fault at all, he was really, really on a really good run and doing extremely well. So yeah, I have popped Gasly as maybe a little bit of a surprise 5th. In 4th place, I have put Oscar Piastri. Possibly Oscar could qualify a bit better than that. He doesn't seem to particularly struggle with Monaco. He went reasonably well here last year. I'm just kind of waiting at the minute for Oscar to fully find his groove again. He just seems to be, I don't think he's struggling. I just feel like I say, he just needs to find his groove again. He's had a really higgledy-piggledy start because, as we know, the start of the season was terrible for Oscar and bad, well, just bad for McLaren in general. And he just seems to be a bit off the pace of Lando at the minute. And that's a bit unusual. Yes, he's had the odd flashes where, well, he nearly won a race this year. And that's like, I felt like, oh, we've got him back. Here's the old Oscar. He's found his groove again and he's going. but he just doesn't seem to be quite comfortable yet. So I'm really hoping that this European leg will be the start of Oscar getting in his groove again and really taking it to the rest of the grid. In third place, I have got George Russell. I think that could actually be a little bit optimistic. I just don't particularly have a good feeling, as I've said, about the Mercedes here this weekend. But I do think George will be absolutely pulling out all the stops to try and close this points gap to Kimi. And as we know, in Monaco, qualifying is massively important, because with the lack of overtaking, really, your qualifying position is more important here than I would say anywhere else. So I do think that there is a chance that George could pop it in third, but I don't think he'll be in contention for the pole. And in second place, so on the front row of the grid, I have got Charles Leclerc. I think it'll be a bit like last year in that he will be doing extremely well in the free practice sessions. He'll go extremely well in qualifying, but I've just got a feeling that a bit like last year, Norris will pip him to the pole. I did originally write it down as Norris in second and Charles Leclerc taking pole, and then I swapped it back. I wouldn't really like to say which way that's going to fall, but I've had to come down on one side or the other. And I just think that after last weekend's disaster for McLaren, the way Lando's going to be feeling, the fact that the car will go very well here, the fact that he absolutely cleaned up last year here, and he doesn't want to get two-tailed off. You've got to remember he's the defending world champion. And yes, everybody's concentrating on the battle at the front, the battle between Kimi and George, but Lando's still there or thereabouts. In much the same way that Ferrari is still right in there for constructors, so are McLaren. And Lando is still within touching distance. And it's a real shame that both the McLaren boys lost so many points at the beginning of the seasons with all the disasters that McLaren had, because I do really, really think they would be further up there and the point gap wouldn't be quite as big. But yeah, Lando likes it here, and I can just see him, and it will be only just, but I think he will just take pole. Moving on to the race. It's very difficult to deliver you anything different by way of a race prediction because, as I've said, hardly any overtaking, but you have always got the pit stops, you've got unreliability, you've got accidents, literally anything can happen. So I've kind of made my best guess, really, and I have got Piastri finishing fifth. I think Oscar will have a solid race. Hopefully he'll be a little bit better than fifth. Like I've said, I'm really behind Oscar all the way in getting his groove back and really getting this season underway for himself. So I think he could finish a good solid fifth, maybe a little bit further up. In fourth, I've actually put Lewis Hamilton. Again, the Ferraris are going to go great here. Lewis is coming off the back of a podium, full of confidence. The track's going to really suit the car. It's Monaco. He holds the lap record. It's Lewis. So I've put him down for fourth, secretly kind of hoping, or not so secretly now, but kind of hoping that it could be another podium for him, because I think that will do absolute wonders for his confidence. I think it will do absolute wonders for Ferrari. And I'd just like to see it. And really, apart from that, there's not really any change in the top three. I've predicted Russell to qualify in third. I think he'll finish third. I've predicted Leclerc to finish second because I've predicted him to qualify second. And I've predicted the race winner to be, much as it was last year, the pole sitter, Lando Norris. I think Lando could win this weekend. And yes, you have no doubt noticed that Kimi Antonelli is conspicuous by his absence in all of my predictions. And I am going to get to that with my next section of Hit the Mark and Pull Over and Park. Now, when it came to Hit the Mark for Monaco, I do write some notes, and I wrote down Ferrari. I wrote down Ferrari for all the reasons I've already mentioned, and I'm not going to go over them again. Ferrari are going to be the team that will absolutely excel this weekend. And I do still stand by that. I do absolutely think they will. I'm not saying that they're not going to hit the mark. I do think they will. But I just wanted to go a little more specific, a little more out there, a little less low-hanging fruit. So then I scribbled out Ferrari and I put Alonso, because I thought Alonso's really going to do well this weekend. Like we've said, the circuit will suit the Aston Martin because it's a low-power circuit. I've gone over this, why I think the Aston Martin will do quite well. So then I thought, I'll go out a little bit on a limb and I put Alonso as hit the mark. But then, I don't know. Again, this is another one of my, can't really give you any particular reason. It's just a vibe. So you can laugh at me when the race is finished, because on paper, the likelihood of this being correct isn't great. But I've just got a feeling. If you cast your mind back to last year, you probably won't remember, but a certain driver finished 7th at Monaco last year. And yes, caught in the DRS train a little bit, but actually did a pretty solid job. And the driver I'm talking about so far has had a shocking season. He has been shown up by his teammate. He's another one, a little bit like Oscar, that can't quite find the groove this year, but it's definitely more pronounced with this driver, in as much that you wouldn't say Oscar is struggling, but you would say this driver has been struggling so far this season. And I've just got the strangest feeling that he will turn that around this weekend. He has been the subject of some paddock gossip, which has been laid to rest. So my hit the mark this week, someone who I think will exceed expectations and bring home a really good result, is Esteban Ocon. Yeah, Esty Bestie. So yeah, that's my hit the mark this week. I think we could be reviewing Monaco and saying, what about Esty bringing it home in the points? But I guess we'll see. Now, my pullover in park. I've kind of sort of gone for the low-hanging fruit here, in that my pullover in park, I have got Mercedes. And again, for all the reasons I've mentioned so far, the track isn't going to suit the car. It's not somewhere they particularly go all that well, and it is going to magnify their weaknesses and not play to their strengths. And so I do have Mercedes as pullover in park, but I kind of wanted to get a little bit more specific. And while I wish him no bad luck whatsoever, I think Antonelli is going to take the brunt of the bad luck this weekend. He has had 4 wins on the bounce, 3 of which were from pole. He is on such a fantastic run, while George seems to be getting all the bad luck. And I just have a bit of a feeling, and here I go again, I'm very much on vibes this week, aren't I? Just got a feeling that Antonelli's not actually going to finish the race. I've just got a feeling that as fast as he is and as good as he is, that there's going to be a little lapse in concentration somewhere, or maybe a little bit of hot-headedness again, and he's going to clip the wall somewhere, because his biggest strength at the moment is his speed. His racecraft is good, but there is a little immaturity in his forward thinking, in his long-term thinking when it comes to racing, because he's young and he is still inexperienced. But his greatest strength is sheer speed at the moment, and that's going to be absolutely no use to him in Monaco whatsoever. And that is why I've not put Antonelli in the top 5 for qualifying or the race. Realistically, yes, he could qualify in the top 5. I could be entirely wrong about that, but I don't see him finishing in the top 5 in the race. It's not a track that suits him. It's not a track that suits his car. And I've just got a feeling this extraordinary run of wins, of talent, and a little bit of luck are just going to fizzle out for him this weekend and bring him back down to earth with a little bit of a bump. I don't think long-term it will matter. Monaco is the first half of a double header. I think should something go a bit wrong for Antonelli, I think he'll bounce back from it quite quickly, ready for Barcelona the following weekend. But yeah, I'm afraid my pullover in park for this week is Antonelli. Overall, Mercedes, but specifically Antonelli. Now that concludes my preview of the Monaco Grand Prix. I'm looking forward to this weekend. I hope you are too. And I hope that even if it's not your favourite race and you think in some ways that the F1 has outgrown the Monaco circuit, that you can still get something from it and enjoy the history of the place. It is still quite spectacular to watch, and sometimes it does throw up an absolute Brahma of a race from nowhere, so you just don't know. But anyway, I'm signing off for now. I'm wishing you all an excellent rest of the week, a lovely weekend, enjoy watching the race, and I will see you back here next week for our Monaco Grand Prix review. So until then, don't forget the cheesy tagline, that Tracks F1 podcast. Track the action, join the fun. Bye guys!